Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
In my early years as a video editor, more like a logger, I remember one of our photographers had just returned from a hunting expedition in Russia. Upon review of his footage, it was all red. There was good reason, though. During the filming, Russia had just invaded Georgia. When I think of photography and filmmakers, my mind always drifts to this memory because the people behind the lens are the true storytellers, experiencing life and sharing adventures for us all to get a taste of the world around us. I'm excited to hear the stories and adventures of my next guest, filmmaker and photographer, Natalie Rhea. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Howdy. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I always feel like the people behind the lens are the ones that really experience life in such a different way because you're telling stories. I mean, it's such a different viewpoint that you get to experience than anyone else. And I'm excited to hear your stories. But let's start off. What's one of your favorite? Do you have a fishing story lined up for us, Natalie?
Oh gosh, I do. It's almost semi-embarrassing. It's more of the misadventures that y'all mentioned. So I was working with, I am working with All Hands Craft Cocktails. And they entered me into a fly fishing tournament on the coast of Cape Cod. And I've only been fly fishing for a couple of years now and had never gone saltwater fly fishing. And during this time, I was incredibly busy. And this was in, I think the competition was in May. And so I find this out in March. And meanwhile, I'm also being asked to go on my first turkey hunt for Modern Huntsman and navigating all of that and the inner workings. And I was running out of time to learn how to saltwater fly fish. And one of our ambassadors, Josh Crumpton, was going to the coast to fish with one of our other ambassadors, Owen Gaylor. And I asked him if I could hop on and just learn how to saltwater cast because I know it's a completely different beast. Like the way that I describe it would be trout fishing is like a ballet, whereas saltwater fishing is more like the slot machines in Vegas. Like it's just a completely different ball game, way more intense.
Good imagery,
right? And so I'm incredibly competitive, and I did not want to go to a competition and be bad at it. So I went down to the coast, and 5 minutes within getting on the boat, I was like, I started my period, and I'm not feeling like. I don't know about you, but when I'm on my cycle, I can get really irritable and short, and learning a new skill while you're in that kind of mindset is not a great combination. So we're 5 minutes into the boat ride and I'm like, oh, please, dear Jesus. And thankfully I had kind of predicted it. So I prepared, but being in that mindset of trying to learn their skill, I was not having it. And I love Owen to death. We had a great call the other day. But he had more of the dad militant type approach with me for learning how to cast. And the whole time I was like, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And thankfully, I did come out of it being a better caster, and I had learned to saltwater fish. He was great. And afterwards, we were buds. But so then I went up to the coast in Cape Cod a month later, and we were, Josh and I were actually partners because it's teams of two. And still new to fishing in general, just the last couple of years. I hadn't learned about different fly lines and everything. That's something I'm just getting into. And so someone hands me a rod, and they had not changed out the line. It was a floating line for tarpon, saltwater tarpon. And instead of having a sinking line, I was fishing for a straight 10 hours with a floating line until literally the last, and not even and eat. I don't think I hadn't eat all day. And the last 45 minutes of the competition, I kid you not, someone was like, Natalie, you've got a floating line on there. You should maybe let that sink for, 12 seconds and then start stripping. And I don't know if you've done any saltwater fishing. We were fishing for a striped bass, and it's like you cast and then you strip really fast into this little basket. And so it was just that for straight 10 hours. And I was burnt out. And as soon as he told me that, I started getting to eat like every time I cast. I was so mad that no one had told me that earlier. I was like, I could have been catching fish all day. So so now I know I'm going to be going in this next competition. I'm definitely going next May because I have to redeem myself. I did not feel like I did a good job at all. It was still incredibly fun, and the people that we were with were really great and sports about it. But Josh did great, but I feel like I have room to improve. So I'm very excited to go back again next year.
Well, and then also like when you start catching fish, you're like, do we have to stop? Like, because
Right.
you're like, can we just keep this going? Because now I think I've got it cut. Like I've got it figured out. I have the
Exactly.
hard time like when the bite is happening to just like stop everything and leave. And I could like when I think there's opportunity to keep catching fish, it's really hard for me to push that button and be like, okay, I guess we're gonna stop. Like
Oh, 100%. And that happened recently too when I was in Montana, and my friend Sam Lundgren and I were fishing together, and had this event called Trout Camp, and with a bunch of different ambassadors that came together to fish for a week on the Bighorn. And he and I found a really great fishing hole, and we were so stoked on it, but the sun was setting and we were told that we were supposed to be back for dinner at a certain time. And so we were like, I guess we're going to call it. And so when we get back, no one else is back yet. And the guy that was organizing the dinner and everything wasn't even back until after dark. We're like, we could have been fishing for like another 4 hours.
I know. And like throughout the entire time, you're like, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, like there's probably in your mind, you keep telling yourself like there was probably no more fish and that you hit it at the right time. But part of you still like so disgruntled, but you're just trying to tell your brain like, oh, we probably got it at the right time. Like we're good. Aren't you so happy we're here? We're not hiking in the dark.
Right.
You just make up these excuses to why it's a good reason why you're not. But yeah, the last time Jess and I did that, I was like, Justin, we have like we can just fish this one hole. And he was like, we have to pick up the kids. And I was like, no, we're totally fine. And sure enough, like driving back, we were 5 minutes late. He's like, I told you we didn't have enough time to fish that hole. I was like, well, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, every time.
But Natalie, I want to hear about what you do. Can you give our listeners a little bit of information about your day-to-day job, which is beautiful?
Yeah, it's pretty funny actually, because I have my hands in a lot of different things, and the most common question that I get from people is, what do you do exactly? Because I'm here and I'm there, and 1 second I'm in Montana, and then I'm in Scotland, and then I'm in Colorado, and I'm with a band, or I'm, on the water, or I'm hunting, and people are very confused by what I do, which I kind of love that people can't figure out where I'm at. But I'm a filmmaker and photographer by trade. I'm also a writer, and I mean, these days, I have a country music background, so I was producing and directing and writing music videos and working with a lot of artists for, a decade. I still do occasionally, but now I primarily work in the outdoor rec and Western spaces. So I do a lot of hunting, fishing, cowboy type content. I'm not a content creator, but I do a lot of documentary filmmaking and commercials. I'm also a comedy writer. So I write, comedy commercials, and I don't know if people follow Top Sportsman, but that's a comedy series that I direct and co-write with some good friends of mine, where we have it's a parody on the 90s fishing shows with Captain Dick Fisher. And we kind of poke fun at those very serious, goofy, dry stories from the 90s. And we film it on a like old DV cam. So it's proper tape. It looks like shit because it's supposed to. But those are really fun to make too. But yeah, so I mean, on the day-to-day, I'm gone like probably 80% of the time these days, traveling for different shoots and different clients, for All Hands, for Modern Huntsman, for Swarovski Optics. I just actually wrapped 2 days ago. I wrapped a film out in Big Bend. We were with a wildlife cinematographer following him as in his pursuit of a certain wildlife that I can't mention yet, for Swarovski Optics and Modern Huntsman, which is an incredible opportunity and story to tell. So stuff like that all the time. It's great. I love everything that I'm doing right now.
I mean, I've said this before on this podcast. Some of the toughest, when you follow someone hunting or just being in the outdoors, who's the best athletes? It's the people behind the lens.
100%.
I mean, I was filming something and I looked back at the footage and I was like, oh my gosh, Lauren, breathe. I was like, I'm like talking to somebody. I'm like trying to catch my breath. And so the amount that your body you always have to control your breath. You have to control you can't be shaky. You have to be quiet and always you're like a bat, right? Your ears are always open and you have to get the shot. Cause I mean, I can't tell you how many times as a video editor, I've had footage being returned and they missed the kill shot or they missed, and we just have to do this like crazy montage of just, just of an edit of just like zoom in, zoom out. And people are like, oh, I missed it. And we're like, yeah, you did because it wasn't even there.
We were tricking you to think you did. Yeah. No, truly. I was actually on a flight. Where was I going? I don't even know. I was on a flight recently and I had the sweetest couple, older couple next to me. And they were asking me about what I do. And I can't remember what they said, but it was along the lines of, they had said something that made it sound like photographers and filmmakers didn't have that hard of a job. And I was speaking in reference to like this outdoor rec type stuff. And I corrected them. I was like, no, actually, like filmmakers and photographers that work in my space have to be athletes. We are athletes because we have to keep up with them in their pursuit while hauling very heavy gear and not missing a shot. And it's also just a very weird experience to follow someone in their pursuit of something that they're doing and trying to make it as organic as possible and not stop them for staged shots, even though you do have to do that sometimes. But that's another level of, oh, I want this really gorgeous ridgeline shot, which means I now have to haul all of my gear to the mountain over next to them. And then once we get that shot, then I need to tear down my gear and bring it up the mountain that they're on. Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah. And also weather, you have to be like, okay, what's going to happen to my camera? If it's snowing, if it's raining, batteries die a lot faster. Like your brain is constantly, you're not necessarily in the moment because you're always having to expect what's going to happen next. Like you also have to be like a psychic. Like, okay, if he shoots this animal, if this deer comes over here, I need to be situated here, but I can't screw up their hunt. And so it's just a matter of being respectful of the hunter, but also trying to capture a moment, which I know that is really, really difficult.
It definitely is. But I was talking to Byron Pace the other day. He's another outdoor filmmaker. And we were just talking about how privileged we feel to do what we do simply because there's pursuits and films and photography and opportunities that we've had, stories that we get to tell that we wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity if we had a different career. So like going on this week, someone invited me to go on a reindeer hunt in Iceland. And if I didn't have the means, I would never have the opportunity to go do something like that on my own unless I was invited to go with someone that was already going because I have to tell their story and photograph it or film it. And so we get to be part of these really cool things and witness them, which is equally as gratifying as if we were doing it ourselves. So we don't necessarily have to be the ones hunting and fishing or climbing or doing whatever pursuit that we are following, but being a part of that story is equally gratifying. And it's a privilege to be able to do that, really.
Without a doubt. I have to say when I do video editing. That's really my main career and what I went to school. And one of the best things about this, what I get to see is what you guys get to film. And I get to think like, oh, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. Especially I worked on a show called Montana Game Wardens. And it was, filming these wardens and their day-to-day lives. And I was actually able to tell Jess, I'm like, I think you should go elk hunting over here. Cause they would never disclose exactly where they saw
Sure.
some elk. But as someone who was behind the line, who was able to get this information, it also fueled me to look at these locations and also places to go fishing. Justin was the producer of Fly Fishing the World and literally traveled around the world uh, filming these fish, these species that you never get to see if you live in
Sure.
the States. And so I think it's an opportunity for you to experience life, but also like to have people like me get to experience that. And you do such a beautiful job, Natalie, in portraying what that you can almost feel what it looks like. You can obviously see what it looks like, but you can smell it. And you do such a good job with sound too. Like
Oh,
you
thank you so
capture
much.
sound really well. There was that cowboy one that
Yeah.
I was watching. I love that. Like the rope hitting his hand, you captured that. Like you really captured the essence of a moment.
Thank you so much. I, thankfully have a very talented team of cinematographers and editors that I work with a very talented editor, David. He's a bit of a Foley artist himself. I don't think he creates his own sounds, but he does an incredible job at pairing sounds with film, which I think is a little bit of an lost art when it comes to the short form documentary storytelling. You see it a lot in, long form documentaries, but especially in short form, I think people forget that. I think part of that's because in not to go too down the rabbit hole, but filmmaking is started to use a lot of the slow-mo stuff in the last decade. And
Yes.
that has, I think, lended itself to a lack of really beautiful sound, which, is what really draws you in. Because film, if the visuals aren't there, all you have is sound, similar to this podcast. And you're leaning on your own imagination as to what that sounds and feels like. And so a film should be able to live on its own without visuals. And so sound is incredibly important. And I've definitely tried to emphasize that in my last projects the last few years. So I'm glad that you recognize that. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. What is like one of your most favorite projects like that if you have like on your calendar, like I'm so excited to do this shoot. Like what is like one of your favorite things to what's your
Oh
specialty
my
that you love to go adventure out to?
goodness. I really love Gosh, that's such a hard question because I'm so curious about so many things. And I mean, similar to what I was just saying about our conversation with, being grateful for those opportunities, there's things that I like to learn about that I get to have this direct relationship with groundskeepers and with biologists, et cetera, and learn from them on a lot of these shoots in a way where they're so passionate about what they do that reading it from a book or a blog online just doesn't do it justice. And it's coming directly from the source of those people that are in that environment or impacted by it. And those are really my favorite shoots when I get to go learn from these people. Like when I was in Scotland in September, this inspired a shoot that I want to do hopefully next year. But I had the opportunity to go for red stag out in the Scottish Highlands, and the groundskeeper there is absolutely incredible. His name's Sam Thompson. And we went out, I think we went for stag 4 times. And thankfully, like I had a shot at one on the second day and my safety was on. And so if I hadn't have done that, I would have gotten it. But it's fine. I'm really grateful that in a way that it didn't happen because that time on the hill with him, that extra time that I got, because if I had have shot one the first or second day, I wouldn't have had that opportunity to really learn the landscape and learn from him about wildlife management and land management and the effects of what they're doing to conserve that property. And so I really absorb a lot of that from people like him and from people on the shoots that I'm doing. So really the shoots that I really love to do is where I get to learn new things. And then, I get to decide if I want to continue down that path and pursue those on my own. But yeah.
I also love like when I go visit people in their like hometown and seeing them being such a professional in their own elements always
Sure.
amazes me. I'm like, wow, you can do this like with your eyes closed. And I'm so lost right now. I have no clue where I am or like what I'm doing. And so seeing people in their elements and doing it so well, I mean, I keep going back
Mm-hmm.
to that cowboy thing. I could watch that over and over again because I'm like, gosh, look at it. He just knows what he's doing. I would have no clue. I'd be like, pet the horse on the nose. I'd be like, whoa,
Gosh, I know. Yeah, and it's, I'm grateful to work with some brands that I don't really like the word authentic, but lean into authentic storytelling in the sense where we're not staging this. We're working with real cowboys. We're working with, real whatever career it is. And so Chris Iyer is the one in that Tecovas Modern Huntsman film that you're referencing. And he's great. That was actually supposed to be a proper short film, like maybe 10 minutes long, but due to budgets and schedules, et cetera, we ended up cutting it down into that shorter poetic piece. But I am hoping to spend more time with him. He's such a great human and very good at what he does, pack muling. So yeah.
Yeah, that was, I mean, just everything about that was so, I mean, actually, we should say, go to Natalie's. This is on your website as well, which is Natalie Rhea.
NatalieRhea.com, RHEA.
Yeah. Natalie, I'm always learning new things. I was like, what's the difference between like a filmmaker, a videographer? And you gave such a beautiful response. So maybe for people who really don't know terminology, like what is a filmmaker?
Sure. So gosh, I guess people in the outdoor industry tend to call themselves filmmakers because it is so involved as far as a lot of times we're working with smaller brands, or we're environmentalists and we're conservationists and we're trying to keep in mind having a smaller impact on the planet and leave no trace. And so part of that is having smaller crews. And so because of that, we are the writers, we're the producers, we're the directors, sometimes we're the editors and do everything in post as well. And we are the ones writing contracts and writing shot lists and doing literally everything. And so we'll call ourselves filmmakers because it's like this 10 to 15 person team in one body. Maybe this is just my own personal thing. I'm not sure, but I tend to get offended when people call me a videographer just because a videographer I consider someone that's a little bit more run and gun, and they still have to be, quite scrappy, and be that person that wears 10 hats. That's not to take away from that. They do a lot on their own too.
Yeah.
But I tend to think them as earlier on in their career. And I've, built a career for myself, over a decade. Gosh, I've been doing photography since 2006 and started video in like around 2009. So I've gotten to a point where I also am comfortable and confident in what I want to do. I don't like producing, but I find myself doing it sometimes. But I'm a director and I'm a writer. And that's really my pursuit. And so sometimes I still call myself a filmmaker because I like this film last week, I was doing everything. I did have a small crew, but I was producing and directing. So it's easier to just say filmmaker. But yeah, that's it's different for everyone. That's just my personal preference.
Absolutely. I do want to go back to Natalie because I'm so curious about your comedy thing. Because first off, I think I'm funny, but I know I'm not. Like, I know I'm probably like, I think I'm funny, but I know if I was to go onto a comedy stage, it would be completely silent. I know my jokes are like, they're just dad jokes, but I find them quite hilarious. How do you build your, like, the comedy thing? I really am curious.
So I actually learned this term recently, but observational humor is what I do. So Taika Waititi is my favorite director. He does some of that, just awkward human behavior, awkward things that we do in daily life, emphasizing that. And I think we as humans are very awkward, and I find nature incredibly humorous. And so it's so easy to combine the two of those things. Or, I've done a ton of commercials that have nothing to do with the outdoors that are comedy, and I've done a lot of outdoor comedy stuff. But I just find observational humor like the funniest type of humor because everyone can relate to it. Even things as simple as the BBC talking animals thing. I'm like, everyone's making voices to animals. Like everybody does that. They just happen to do a really good job at like making it really popular first.
Yes.
So stuff like that I find fascinating. I actually did. I don't like telling people this just because I do want to tighten it up a little bit. And but it was very funny when I was living out of my car a few years ago, I was thinking about climate change and how to get people to care about climate change. And I just in my head started writing this comedy short. It's called The Intervention, and I'm friends with a lot of improv actors in Austin, and so they all came together to make this happen for me and my DP and a few other people. And I wrote this this climate change comedy. It's called The Intervention, and every character in it is a different element. So there's like earth, wind, fire, river, and glacier.
It sounds like Captain Planet.
Yeah, similar, yes. And so it's an intervention against fire because he's been too wild, and him and wind have had a friends with benefits relationship. Like she's been blowing him too much and not helping the situation. And meanwhile, I don't want to ruin the end, but it's just an intervention against him. And so they're just bantering the whole time. And so that is probably one of my favorite projects that I've done. And my goal by the end of this year is to tighten that up so I can re-enter it into the world, if you will.
Oh my gosh, I need this in my life. I love things like this. I do. They're like my favorite.
Yeah. And I, maybe I'll enter it into the festivals. We'll see. But my hope when I have some time to think about it, maybe I can do like a series out of it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. I still remember this was like, oh, I don't know. I think his name was Jimmy Big Time. Did you ever watch? It's old. I mean, I want to say it's like from 2008, and I think it was called Jimmy Big Time. And what he would it's an old one, but he's pretending he's a big time celebrity hunter, and it's about him and his friend who films him, but they're the two ones always on camera. He's like, did you do the recreate shot? And just like you would love it because it's like the humor of how silly sometimes Jimmy Big Time is. And I don't even know if they create it, but Jimmy Big Time, he's like from the Midwest, and so it was it's just really funny because it just made a stab at outdoor hunting and TV shows.
I wonder if someone was trying to tell me something similar to this the other day that I had never heard of. I wonder if this was it. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, and I also love what's another? If you're also like into comedy, Man on a Buffalo. Have you ever seen those small snippets?
Wait, I think so. Wait, is this the one where they take old film but cut it up into weird? Maybe it's
yes.
not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. It literally was, I think there was a show called Man on a Buffalo, and then they just like cut it up into like really funny, like, I'm a man on a buffalo, and then he's like, oh, look here. And
yes, I saw that for the first time very recently.
That is also, you can get yourself into a big rabbit hole. Watch Jimmy Big Time and Man on a Buffalo, and I bet your juices like of comedy. And if you also need some help on comedy, because I'm so good at it, obviously. I will give you I'll be the first one to watch this and give you my expertise.
Yes, I would love that.
That's the other thing. You have so many people reviewing your stuff. You're like, I don't need anyone to give me more feedback.
Oh my gosh, I'll tell you what. Top Sportsman, that comedy series we're doing with Dick Fisher has. It was incredibly risky for a small brand to want to do something like this, and it is by far probably our most popular thing that we do at All Hands. And
I love it.
It is, everyone loves it. I mean, it's wild how well received it is because it's just three of us making weird shit and like Oliver Sutro is my cinematographer and I'm the director and editor, and then I have my my photographer / PA / sometimes boat driver Dylan Schmitz. He's incredibly versatile and talented as well. And then our talent Bennett, who's Captain Dick Fisher. We just get together ahead of time. I choose the topics. We kind of go over some bits that we could do, and then when we go into filming, it's always a 3-day shoot. We knock out 2 episodes and we spend the first day fully fleshing out what the bits are and writing it, and then we film for 2 days and that's it. And it's a very beautiful magic formula that we have doing that, and we shoot it on that old DV cam, and then I just edit it later, and I think we're almost maybe 8 to 10 episodes that we filmed so far, and maybe 4 or 5 have come out. And we're about to film 3 episodes in a couple weeks. But it's quite. I'm pretty impressed with how much people love it, because it's so dumb. It is so dumb.
Which you're also like, man, that probably like the way that it seems like it has like the wheels are turning, like it just has a rhythm, like it
Yeah.
basically is making itself, as opposed to like when you go to Scotland and you like spend all this time and you're like, how will everyone receive this? And you're like hope and hope and hope, and then you're like the other one that like doesn't, that's just like super like, hey, this is funny, this is great, we'll do 3 in 2 days, and then you're like, I'm in Scotland for 25 days and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man.
That is so crazy. So what's for your future, Natalie? What do you have going? What's coming up for you?
Gosh, my schedule, I think, at least right now, it's booked out all the way through the end of November. And then I have a bunch of stuff already coming up next September. I'm already planning my next Scotland trip, and a lot of stuff with Swarovski next year. But really, the next couple months, I'm going on a lot of hunting and fishing expeditions with people that I need to shoot. But hopefully, I'm making it out of the country a lot more next year for various shoots, and just to experience more fishing and pursuing more species, both for hunting and fishing, really. But I mean, these days people ask me like, "Where were you shooting last week?" And I have gotten to a point where I'm gone so much that I can't even think about where I was yesterday, which is not like, I actually am not stoked on that aspect. Like I need to be able to slow down enough to remember what I'm doing and what's coming up. And so maybe I just need to be better at journaling, because what I tend to do is go back, a month later, I'll try to retroactively write about an experience just because I've been so slammed. But maybe if I did a better job at journaling, I'd remember where I was the last few days.
But your journaling is kind of like your filmmaking, right? And then you get to like revisit like visually, which is kind of
Sure.
cool.
Yeah. And, to be fair too, Instagram, I guess, was a bit of a journal for a while, because, writing some storytelling or some stream of consciousness in real time. But, Instagram's a shit show now. So I
I
don't really do
know.
that as much anymore.
I don't know. It's I just recently talked to somebody about social media and like what does that mean? And I'm sure as a filmmaker, it's kind of hard to navigate because I think it's great that everyone can express and be artist on the platform. I really do. I think it's such a cool way, but I think it's also I don't know. It's just been interesting. Like content is just 24/7, and I think that I don't know. I think there can be like a balance, I
Yeah.
guess.
It's also really hard because, I mean, proper storytelling is meant to be thoughtful and have time. It's not meant to be, how can we capture this in someone's attention in 10 seconds, and filmmaking is not meant to be vertical. And I would,
Yes.
I'm sure there's an argument for graduating with the times, but no, like filmmaking is inherently meant to be horizontal, to show off a landscape or for movement, to allow movement. If you shot something in vertical or shot a whole film in vertical, there's so much going on that you're missing around the edges, or someone walks out of frame. Like, people don't realize that, especially people like brands that ask you to re-edit something that you've already shot into a vertical medium. It's like, it's not as easy as that looks, because you're
Without a
working with a
doubt.
whole different landscape. I'm sure you've definitely encountered that.
Oh, yeah.
um
It took me
but
a long time, like, I would be filming all the time, like, with my phone, like, the very beginning, because I didn't wasn't very social media savvy, and someone's like, "You had to do it vertical," and it's like, "I don't understand, but you can't see." But they're
but
like, "But it's not close enough," and I'm like, "Close enough? I don't
what's
understand."
like really like kind of comedic to me about it is, yeah, people are always on their phones, but people can turn their phones 90 degrees and it be horizontal. Like, it's not that hard.
I know. I totally agree. I like to I think also I love establishing like places, so like your first shot is always a
Yeah.
big shot of like the location. And I mean, I guess now that doesn't seem like that really exists, but that's filmmaking still needs to exist. It needs to tell a story. It needs to take people there, like especially for fishing. I mean, I think when good films come together, it can also spark um, wanting to conserve and be advocates and stewards to the things we love. And so you have such a huge voice to create beauty and bring that to people who, like, why should I care about Florida? You know, like, let's tell this story, and this is why it's so important. Like, these are the beaches. I just think it's so important to have professional storytellers and not get lost in instant gratification.
100% agree. I just don't know what that looks like for the future, but at least that's the path that I'm still pursuing.
Well, obviously, though, it's still very important. You're booked. You're still super busy. So obviously there's still a need for that. I know there is.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, yeah. I got back last night from Nashville from a shoot with Flatland Cavalry. I leave next week to go to Oregon to shoot Top Sportsman.
Amazing.
I'm just, I'm so slammed. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, now how can people follow? I mean, I know you're on Instagram. Are you not posting as much? But how can people like keep up with like all the amazing things that you're doing, especially the comedy stuff? Like, you're never. It's beautiful that you're never stopping to create more interesting stories.
Yeah, I've been so caught up in the creation aspect that I haven't been keeping up with my own stuff so that people can see it. But people can follow me on Instagram. It's Natalie_Rhea, RHEA. Or my website is natalie@natalierhea.com. I also just got on Vero, which I guess is the new social app geared towards filmmakers and photographers.
I've never heard of this yet.
I know. I think it's supposed to be, you know, if you are a filmmaker or photographer, I think it's what you would hope Instagram would have been.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it's VERO. So I'm on that now. I haven't really posted that much, but I'm probably posting there a lot more now. It's ad-free, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm mostly on there, and then, you know, if people want to create something, it's Natalie@natalierhea.com is my email, and then just Natalie Rhea is my website.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.